Hey there, Alex Kidman here with my video review of the Nokia G21. It's yet another affordable Nokia phone from the folks at HMD Global, officially retailing at $299 here in Australia. Now, that $299 price point is a super competitive one right now. It's nicely below where the mid-range phones start becoming quite compelling, but above the really cheap and simple options you might opt for. So, what's good here and what's not so good? So, the flagship claim for the Nokia G21 is that HMD Global says it'll last for up to 3 days of usage with its 5000 milliamp battery. How true is that? Well, look, it's always a variable matter, of course, because if you hammer it, it will die within a day, and yes, I have hammered it, and yes, it did die within that day. But in more generalized tests, I can see how you could get up to 3 days at a stretch. If I was using it relatively lightly, yeah, 3 days was possible. Charging the Nokia G21 is via USB-C with a 10-watt adapter supplied in the Australian retail box. That's not notably quick, but then this is a budget phone, and at least there's a charger there at all. Like most other Nokia phones you can buy right now, it's also guaranteed Android upgrades for a few years. This still isn't common in the cheap Android space, although in the case of the Nokia G21, that's only a 2-year guarantee starting at Android 11, so you're only talking through to Android 13 at best. Now, some of HMD Global's competitors, brands like Samsung or Motorola, are starting to make more noise about guaranteed upgrades for their lower cost phones. It is worth checking that. But to be fair to them, HMD is the company that actually has the track record here for both annual updates and security updates. And you do get 3 years of security updates, so it'll still get security updates after it stopped getting full Android OS upgrades. That's quite nice. Now, part of the reason that HMD can do that and do that in a timely fashion is because, like most of the rest of their phones, the core experience is quite clean Android. There's no launcher taking up storage space. There's not a whole bunch of pre-installed apps either. So all of that contributes to less performance overhead, and I really do appreciate that. You can always load a launcher on if stock Android isn't your thing, but sometimes starting from basic is indeed the best way to go. The Nokia G21 has a 6.5-inch display with support for up to 90Hz refresh rates. It's not alone in that space, but it is nice to see faster refresh rates in more budget handsets these days. So that in a nutshell is what I like about the Nokia G21. So what sits in the negative column? A 6.5-inch screen is a decent size for a phone these days. Few complaints there, and 90Hz adaptive is nice, but the rest of the Nokia G21 screen really did leave me wanting. It's a 1600 by 720 pixel LCD display, effectively 720p, and it washes out a lot of colour, especially in direct sunlight or at angles. The design, likewise, is kind of plain. The model HMD Global sent me is the Dusk variant, and your only other choice is Nordic Blue. It's not a bad design, but it's a fairly basic one, with a fairly obvious plastic back. It's not quite as showy as some of the Nokia designs or some of its competitors. HMD Global keeps the Nokia G21 cheap by producing it using the Unisoc 2606 CPU, matched up with just 4GB of RAM. And look, that's on the lower side for Android in 2022, and it really does show when you test it out. In Geekbench's CPU test, for example, it scored just 312 for single-core and 1,194 for multi-core applications. For 3D Mark, you're looking at 952 for Slingshot Extreme and just 393 for wildlife performance. This is not a fast phone, and it's not just benchmarks, because benchmarks do not tell the whole story. Using it day by day, lag is pretty common, especially if you do want to, for example, game on this thing. You can expect dropped frames, but even with more complex web pages, I had a bit of stuttering and a few laggy problems that really I could have lived without. It's possible, certainly, to run most Android apps. I mean, you can game on this phone if you must, but yeah, expect some long load times, expect some skipped frames, expect a somewhat compromised experience. And again, yes, it's a budget phone, you can't expect the world, but I could expect a little more, and I've seen a little better out of other competing handsets in this kind of price space. Now, on paper, the Nokia G21's quad camera array, built around a 50 megapixel primary wide sensor, sounds impressive. In real world use, yeah, much less so. Aside from that primary sensor, at the rear you've got a 2 megapixel depth sensor and a 2 megapixel macro sensor, neither of which is particularly good. A lot of these low and mid-range phones have 2 megapixel macro sensors on them, and most of them are poor. But somehow the Nokia G21 managed to be worse. It's got really slow focusing, and you really will struggle to get a decent or satisfying kind of macro shot out of it. You will capture a lot of rubbish along the way. Unfortunately, it's largely the same story for that 50 megapixel primary sensor as well. The G21's camera app will give you zooming capabilities, up to 6 times digital, but you lose quality almost immediately. Even regular shots are mediocre. Overexposure is a common problem. You can sometimes end up with little odd post-processing effects. And look, for sure, cheap phones have cheap cameras. You don't get the best cameras in them. But the Nokia G21's camera is noticeably lacking. It really did leave me wanting. So do I want the Nokia G21? Well, me personally, no, but I can see that there is a market for it. Officially, it retails at $299 here in Australia, although it's not hard to score one for less than that. I've certainly seen quite a few places selling them anywhere from about $230 to $260 locally. And at lower prices, it does have something to offer, especially if you want a basic phone with good battery life. It's also worth noting, Vodafone Australia has it officially for $199, although at the time of recording this, it was offering it for just $169. That might seem like a bargain, although it is worth noting that that is a model that is a little bit more basic. Still the same 4 gig of RAM, but only 64 gig of storage, and based on its spec sheet, it would appear to be a single SIM unit. The full fat model, the non-Vodafone model, gives you 128 gig of storage and dual SIM and microSD expansion. That does not appear to be part of the Vodafone story for that phone. It's very common for those telco-branded phones, though, to drop down to single SIM. They like it that way because they only want you on their networks. So at full price, at that full $299, no, I don't think the Nokia G21 is a particularly compelling prospect. At lower price points, however, it becomes a better option, especially if battery life is your core phone concern. It's not an exciting phone, it's a basic functional little workhorse, and if you can score one for a bargain price, it's okay. It ain't going to thrill you, but it might get the job done. So that's my take on the Nokia G21. Anything you'd like to know, let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hammer that like and subscribe button.